Welcome to the Post Shift Podcast, your raw look at the hospitality industry, brought to you by SHC. What is happening, Post Shifters? Welcome back to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Shawn Soole. This is the live stream for the year. So if you're watching this live, this is the last live stream for the year before Christmas. But it will be an episode that will roll out in January. So if you're listening to this, you'll be listening to this in a month's time. But I'm really looking forward to, if you watched last week's live streams with Chris Elliott and Jeff Gennard from Able BC and Restaurants Canada, you could see what Outlook is looking for from these associations for 2025 and sort of a reflection on 2024. Today, we've got Ian Tostenson from BCRFA. The kind of cool thing with this one is that because last week was pre-GST holiday rollout, it was, let's say, relatively optimistic. And now we've had the GST rollout. I'm really interested in seeing Ian's point of view on all this, because it's going to be very, very different and very, very unique, because it's rolled out and we've had some hinky things happen. But Ian, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your time. So as I mentioned just now in the intro, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way, because I actually had this down quite a number of questions down for last week, but this week I think it's front of brain. First thing we should be asking: how is this GST holiday rolled out for the BCRFA and BC in general?
Well, Shawn, thanks for having me on here. I'm kind of smiling. You call it hinky dink. I've never heard that one. That's quite good. But okay, so here's our perspective from British Columbia. We've heard a lot about the impact, and it's going to be great and stuff. We're not experiencing that yet. I've surveyed about 15 or 20 restaurants. In fact, we were out last night, and they just sort of went, So here's what I think is happening is that if you live in Ontario, it's a 13% discount because it's HST. If you live in the Maritimes, it's 15%. In British Columbia, it's 5%. So, are you going to, as I said earlier, are you going to run out and get in your car for a $5 savings on $100 in a restaurant? That's the problem with BC. The second issue that we're seeing, Shawn, that hasn't moved the needle in the last week since the implementation of this is that our consumers and guests in BC are up against it a little bit harder in the economy than the rest of Canada. So we just don't have that disposable income. So even if you think that 5% is good for a restaurant, I don't think it's having the impact that we wanted it to. And in fact, many operators were just sort of like last weekend having to reprogram everything. Some went really easy, some were not very easy, and some cost them some money. So I think it's moderate at best, if not just neutral at this stage.
To be honest, I've been so focused just on BC, I didn't realize the difference in the taxation between Ontario and BC. Because 13%, then if you're a small business, 13% is quite a substantial little bit of bump in your cash flow for the Christmas season, for sure. 5% is a nice little bump of your cash flow in BC, but when you've got like the BC Liquor Board's not doing the GST holiday. So there's big corporations. I've seen memos from PepsiCo as well saying they're not doing it either.
Yeah, I know. And then our counsel of the industry is that, it's not voluntary. We want people to make a best effort to do this. We actually have seen, I'm aware of two situations. One last Saturday night when the small business independent operator just couldn't physically get to change her point of sale. And then they were kind of busy anyways, because it's just a busy restaurant in Vancouver. Some customer called her staff out, and made a bit of a scene in this 50-cent restaurant. Like, where is my 5% savings? So I've heard that twice, but I basically, like I said last night, I asked this restaurant. Now it's a little bit sort of on the higher end, but they said, you know what, people don't even know. They're not checking anything. So I think it could have been better. So here's what I think should have happened is that this should be, if we're going to take taxes off restaurant meals, make it permanent, give us some time to properly do this. We in British Columbia, were caught by this. It all of a sudden just happened. It's just like, hey, we've announced this. I'm like, what? And so very unprepared. And I think when I think the trick to all this, Shawn, and it's a trick to our industry, if you engage people and they're engaged in it and have a perspective on it, you'll get great outcomes. But by just imposing it, with very little notice and saying, hey, you have to go through all this, and still today, it hasn't been recognized that it's not just changing your point of sale, but it's actually training your staff. Because if you're having a martini and I have a glass of wine and yours is still taxed and mine isn't, that server's in kind of an awkward position if you and I start to challenge it. So it's not what we need. There's got to be bigger things in the economy than this to move it.
So let's look at 2024. Let's reflect on 2024. How do you feel about 2024 for the restaurant industry in BC? And obviously, you talked to other associations across Canada, but how do you feel about BC in 2024?
I think we've just been in a real mess. And we're trying to find ways to maneuver this, but it all starts, I think, with the economy. Now, if you look at the recent stats in British Columbia, we are the lowest performing, if you look at the Maritimes. British Columbia is the lowest performing restaurant market right now in Canada, and that used to be the other way around. BC used to lead restaurant sales growth in the years past. So. As I said to the Premier, I mean, if you just want an indication of how well BC is or is not doing, is look at restaurants. They are a barometer of a whole bunch of things. And right now, in the last, I would say the last 6 to 8 months, actually all of this year, our barometer has been really moderate. In other words, we've got a dining population that is generally centered around value. Looking at things like happy hours. I was in a restaurant the other day and it was really busy, and then at 6 o'clock it was empty because people, and it tells you something. It tells you that the disposable income in British Columbia sucks, to be perfectly honest, and we've got to get this economy back to give people the confidence to go back and start spending a bit more and the things they want to do in movies and restaurants and those sorts of things.
What do you think? What was the biggest challenge a lot of operators brought to you in 2024, and how did you guys try? Because I understand that with these associations, with your organizations, we have multiple in BC and across Canada.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel operators feel like it's an easy fix, like you guys already know what's going to happen for the next 6 months, and I think that's still a crystal ball sort of situation. How did you? What were the biggest challenges that were brought to you in 2024?
I give you an example, and I don't think this is very public, but I think it needs to be talked about. One of the big challenges goes back to November of 2023 when we became aware that a restaurant group in Victoria was being audited by WorkSafe, and they went in and said, "You need to." Gets a bit technical, but you are not including your gratuities, so your direct tip into your payroll. And therefore you're offside, and therefore we're going to charge you $20,000 extra and penalize you. We went so that was November. Now we're into December, so that's what November, 13 months, and we're still having this conversation with them. And because we don't think ever in British Columbia that's direct tips were ever included in the calculation. In fact, the CRA don't require it. So what you own, Shawn, what you get at the table and what you pay into a tip pool, that's your business. If I'm the owner, I had nothing to do with it. Now, WorkSafe have been enforcing this. And so then we got to a point where, no, we agree. Because I was going to take it during the election. I said, enough of this stuff. You need to be conscious and sensitive to this industry and every other industry that has gratuities. You can't just put this stuff on there because it's a bureaucratic convenience, I suppose. So they said, no, you're absolutely right. And then in 2025, we'll do some consultations. And you know what? All of a sudden last month, we hear that 2 major restaurant groups in British Columbia have the WorkSafe guys walked in and said, okay, how are you handling tips? And they said, well, just the way we handle it with the CRA, we let the staff handle it.
Yeah.
And the answer was, well, prove it. We went, what? What do you mean prove it? So we're going to prove nothing here except for we have another meeting. Now we're into 2025. And this is the reason I'm kind of getting this, but Shawn, it has serious implications. We're not talking here a few dollars. We're talking about hundreds of dollars to a small business, thousands of dollars in more WorkSafe fees for larger businesses. And by the way, the larger businesses are just as as unstable right now as the small businesses in this environment. And we're saying that, if in fact you want to do this, you're years out from being able to implement this, because you got to give us fair notice.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we go. And I think we will get a solution on this. But that's the kind of stuff that we are in the background working on. We don't really go out in public and talk about this kind of stuff, because it gets misinterpreted and go, oh my God, and then people start doing the wrong thing. But it is a real issue, and I think that's a great issue. The other one that's been really frustrating is on labor. So, and these are the big issues. So the labor issue is simply in the early September, the federal government just said that's it for labor. We rely on skilled workers greatly in our restaurants, and we have even since before the pandemic. And as you know, the Prime Minister would say, "Well, hire Canadians," and we'd love to hire Canadians, but we don't have Canadians that are skilled as cooks and chefs in our industry. So, I was talking to my colleagues at Restaurants Canada. We think there's anywhere between 13 to 20,000. It's a wide range, but it's still a huge number either way. Shortages in our kitchens in British Columbia. Now we can't basically get workers through, not to get technical, but the LMIA program, which was basically you as an employer would have to prove to government that there's no Canadians skilled and or wanting that job, and then you could bring them in for 2 years and eventually become a permanent resident. Well, that's basically been killed. In 8 months from now, Shawn, I think that we are going to have a major crisis on our hands in terms of labor shortage, because I predict the economy will start to turn. Interest rates are coming down a bit. So all things being equal, we don't have a huge trade war with the United States. It should get stronger, and we're going to need these cooks and chefs. So it's absolutely another one of these things that government does that just throws chaos into the industry. Every educational institution in the province or the country is trying to change this policy because it affected schools. We're not being listened to as an industry, and Canada has been reliant on immigration. And I think the word that we need to look at is responsible immigration. But we have workers, and there's a couple of situations. Beacon Restaurant, in fact, in Victoria. She had some workers, and they say, you know what, I guess it's over for us, and they left. They went home. There's no opportunity for us to get a permanent residency. So now she's got a labor shortage, and she can't get people in. So, again, it's one of those issues to demonstrate that we're working at this stuff behind the scenes, but a lot of the problems we have, Shawn, frankly, are our government. I mean, if you look even at a municipal level, we've been fighting on this whole natural gas thing. So you have, the municipality in Victoria, and recently Vancouver and Richmond, saying, well, we know that the province's building code in 2030 requires for almost the elimination of fossil fuels. But let's do it now, Shawn. Let's just get ahead of it in Victoria and Vancouver, 5 years ahead of it. And so what that means it doesn't mean that restaurants are going to lose natural gas, but it does mean that in new buildings in Victoria, there won't be natural gas, and therefore there won't be restaurants. And as you get less users, our cost of natural gas will invariably go up. Again, it's another example of government sort of, are you doing this because it's fact-based, or are you doing this because it looks optically great for your constituents? But it breeds terror, in this industry, and it breeds terror, Shawn, because to be perfectly frank, it's all done in English, and we have a high ethnic population in our industry in British Columbia, and sometimes the stuff is not understood, it's misinterpreted, and that's our ethnic population throughout British Columbia. They're highly reliant on natural gas. So again, it's one of those things. We're going to solve it one way or the other. We have to. But again, there's 3 examples of where government just gets in our face, and because of their lack of understanding, and I'm not throwing them out. There's a lot of good government people, but they don't understand this stuff, and they sometimes don't want to listen. They're just sort of, this is the way it's going to be, and so I think it takes its toll on all of us to try to solve these things.
Yeah, going back, I think we talked about this in the pandemic because I think the last time we chatted was in the pandemic. Is
Yeah,
this sort of fundamental misunderstanding of just how big and quantifiable the hospitality industry is
yeah,
in the way that because we have so many part-time workers, 1, 2 time a week workers, university kids, we're not deemed the same working populace as say oil and gas, car
yeah,
manufacturing, so on and so forth. So then that we sort of get thrown into this gray area of like, are we a real industry? Like, and that's just outside looking in. As for the FWP program, like the foreign workers program, I was in Singapore in 2019, and I think I mentioned this to Jeff as well last week. Is that Singapore did the same thing? They cut back immigrant workers
mm,
in all fields as like a big sweeping thing because they've been spending a lot of money on universities to get people trained in like finance and tech and all these sort of things. But they put a brush across the hospitality industry as well, which made it really tough because you had to have 4 Singaporean workers to every one like Malaysian worker, which
yeah,
they drive from Malaysia across the bridge to work every day. And it was really tough because, again, as you said, takes Camosun College, for instance,
yeah.
their chef program has been like slowly on the decline for many, many years because kids just don't want to get into the kitchen anymore.
I know.
Canadian kids, I should say,
Yeah,
aren't going. I want to be a chef and want to and put in the work these days. And that's nothing against the generation and stuff. That's just the industry is hard and is better industries out there that you can make more money. That's just
yeah.
the world we live in right now.
That's
So I
right.
think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about what our industry is from all levels of government is sometimes very frustrating. And I would not want to be in your place.
I remember a place where we had time to reflect on strategy for industry, and actually we're talking about careers in hospitality and careers as a cook and a chef, and you had time to because it was quite a stable environment, and the industry is making money, and the industry was able to advance itself and to strategize what it's doing. But we've got all these issues out there. Like, there's no time when you have this frantic, as you described, this environment around us that's so frantic. People are trying to survive their businesses, and that's the reality. So we always say to government, well, what do you expect that Shawn's going to do in a small business? He's just trying to keep the doors open, and you
Mhm.
want to bring in like health safety committees, and you want to bring in red tape on liquor regulations, and he can't get certain products from the LDB because it's slow. Like, come on, you're holding him up. And so that's the next thing we're working on is how do we streamline this. And I think the premier recognized that last week. He actually said, I got to do better with the business community. If I were him, I would put together an economic group to advise him in British Columbia. And years ago we used to have with Gordon Campbell. He attacked red tape and regulations, and that's a killer for our business. So it's not a cost per se; it's a hidden cost. So yeah, like it's in how do you educate the entire government that when you do these things like making these changes on the foreign worker program, they are more interested in the political optics than they are
Mm.
the reality. And there's an attitude, Shawn, that is really sad. And I've heard this from a couple of municipalities, is that if you own a business, you get lots of money. If you
Mm.
got a storefront and you got staff and you got a business, and you're doing all right, and so we don't have to worry about you, but they're not realizing that those tax increases and municipal tax increases and red tape and packaging stuff and all the stuff that they download in isolation really hurts small business. And we want to do the right thing from an employee point of view, absolutely. From an environmental point, absolutely. But there comes a point at which you say, are you going to trade all that off and not have a perfect, maybe not be perfect, but at least you'll have a business that's starting to
Mm.
thrive versus crushing it with all these things around it.
Mm. Do you think the tourism season and the you work with a lot of DMOs, and I've had this
Yeah.
thing about at the last 2 years of tourism season. We've been getting great reporting, great cruise ships, great people coming off the cruise ships, but I'm finding that, especially in summertime, it's still soft, even for the places that are summer places, those places that have big patios and that sort of thing. That still tourist season is in summer is still softer than it has been in previous years, pre-pandemic and just after the pandemic.
I don't understand that one. We're seeing it at Whistler. I
Mm,
was just reading something at Whistler. Victoria's kind of resorty like Whistler, a little bit different, and spending is down. And
mm,
I thought, you know what? What we need when the cruise ships pulls in is a big sign that says 35% off. Everything in the city is 35% off. I don't think, the majority of tourists are coming from America. I don't think they understand in general that there's such a huge savings here because of the dollar, and it's even getting better for them, worse for us. Same in Worcester. With Worcester, though, what's happened in Worcester is that they price high. They almost price like it's an American market, and that's a bit of an issue. Victoria, I don't understand that. I don't understand why they don't spend more. I would if I was 35% off. I think part of the other issue, though, we're seeing in Victoria and in Vancouver and in Nanaimo and the places you hear in the news is the reputation we're getting a little bit in British Columbia about street crime and the problems we're having on the streets. I know places in Victoria that are not overly portrayed as positive, and I know there's places all throughout Vancouver, and we hear about these situations. Let's not be naive. That stuff gets read, and that stuff gets reported, and that's another thing. I think that the government and the federal government have to get at this, because you just can't have people, be having their arms cut or their hand cut off or in hospital or shootings and stuff. That's not helping us, and that may be part of the reason in Victoria as well.
Yeah, Victoria, I find for us anyway, is that because we are such a small populace and a small city, we've got big city problems in a small city, which just sort of exacerbates people's opinions. And because we are so far spread out, like Langford's becoming a little bit more of a populace now, but like a lot of people still came downtown, and I think that the perception of downtown has become it's not good, and so we're just losing downtown traffic, especially with government workers not being back in the office and the remote working still being such a massive thing as well. That's also impacting Victoria in particular quite a lot.
Yeah, and I remember being in LA a few years back, and it was pretty, and it had 10 cities going on in Los Angeles. I went like, Los Angeles, this is like Hollywood. This is where all the money is. But no, they had the same problem, and it left a really negative impression when you went into Los Angeles. The 10 cities in Vancouver, the same thing. I mean, we had a situation in Vancouver where, again, it was a government thing. They closed down a road in Gastown, thinking this would be great for pedestrians. So they diverted all the traffic and tourist traffic through the downtown east side. So you got to witness all that carnage, unfortunate carnage. And what happened in Gastown is that because it became pedestrian and no cars, all the homeless started to take over, and they started to sleep on the benches and stuff. And the business owners are going, "Stop! Please don't do this." One restaurant group was actually sending their guest counts and sales in every week to city council, saying, "I'm down 35% now. Like, how far do we want to take this?" And it was like, "Oh, we're just going to see it through and see what this pilot looks like." Like, we've got to get smarter at this. It's not like an us and them or a left wing or a right wing. Is that we need to get smart about business, and I think the premier actually recognizes this, is that business will drive and be a remedy for all of these things, but we got to get business strong, and we've got to get in the resource sector strong. And it's unfortunate, but you see it, Shawn, because you live there, but we've had a lot of closures in Victoria, and I'm thinking it might be even higher in Victoria than the rest of British Columbia for some reason. I don't know, but it's not good.
Yeah, it hasn't been great. Even people who have said they're up on last year, because I did a little survey recently, I got about 150 so answers, and even people saying they were up on last year say that the inflation rate has been so insane that their bottom line hasn't gone up in the same percentage. It's not a same straight line. It might be up. They might be up 20%, but their bottom line's only up 5%. And so inflation has been a massive issue. Do you see any thing on the horizon for inflation to sort of like slow down and calm down a little bit? Because I still think we're doing the big breath out from post-pandemic, and it seems just to keep going.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the overall inflation in Canada is down to 1.9. That's a bit concerning too. When you're almost going the wrong way. I think there's uncertainty with what happens with the Trump tariffs, and if that doesn't happen and it's a bit more moderate than perhaps it sounds like right now, our cost of fresh vegetables, from California, has just gone up because of the declining dollar. Fortunately, I think we can manage those things. So the optimism that I have is this is all this sort of dark stuff. But I think that, we'll continue to have low interest rates. I think that we will see a government in BC get more attuned to building the economy and building confidence. I think that, tourism will probably be stronger this year as the dollar continues to be weak, and people, as I said to Lana Popham, Minister Lana Popham, no in agriculture, but in tourism, I said to her, we just need on the I-5 a big sign that says head north 35% off. I mean, people go, this is awesome. I'd go up there for sure, but we don't market ourselves. And so that needs to happen. We need to take advantage of things like FIFA coming up. We do a pretty good job. I mean, FIFA will have an impact even onto Vancouver Island and et cetera. So we need to be thinking big. We need to be, dealing with some things that the public actually get excited about. Like there's going to be a crackdown in crime. I go, yes. There's going to be some changes in red tape and regulation. We go, yes. And I've told the Premier, you've got to get out and cheerlead and start getting everybody feeling better about this. Because I'm a believer that the psychology of all this is just as equally as opportunistic as the actual fundamentals in the economy. So that's going to be our purpose is how do we connect these dots? When people, when we speak in the media, we're trying to encourage people to get out in a realistic way. We're not going to say, go out and spend money you don't have, but you can go out into a restaurant or a pub and maneuver your way through a happy hour or just having a small snack and sure, people are drinking less. We understand that, a certain demographic, but it's still fun to go out and have a drink. You can have one drink and share an appetizer. And you can go out right now and buy a gift card from your local restaurant or pub, whatever, for $25 and put it in someone's stocking. All these are small things that'll add up to big things for our industry right now.
With obviously labor shortage is always at the forefront of the hospitality industry. I'm trying to change the conversations we have around turnover and staff shortage and stuff like that, because I don't think turnover necessarily needs to be a massive conversation. 80% turnover hospitality industry than usual. What sort of strategies does the BCRFA sort of hand out to members and to the industry when it comes to lowering staff turnover and keeping the people that you have engaged and involved in your business?
I think there's a couple of things. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, the green grass on the other side might be greener, but do you want to live in northern BC and work on an oil rig? So, there's a trade-off with a lot of people in hospitality absolutely love it. So I think that we need, even in a micro sense within the businesses, is just talk to our staff about, trying to create those opportunities. I mean, I think we have to look at a couple of things like total respect that these people that work in hospitality are amazingly talented. They're amazingly committed, and so they need to be reinforced in that. Number one is that what you're doing makes a real difference. You're on you're on a stage every night making people feel good, and it's tiring. So it's not just like, hey, I work in I serve in a restaurant. It's a big deal. So I think they have to be reinforced. That number two is that the money is good. We don't talk about it much, but a server, in a good establishment's not making minimum wage. That's the general population or public perception. They're maybe making $30 or $40 an hour, and suddenly now you're getting serious. Same with kitchens. They're probably $20 plus gratuities plus a bit more wages. So I don't think it's much of a wage issue. I think we need to make sure that we're handling things like mental health, making sure that we can put in place where we can to get benefit programs. So there's, maybe it's, I'll have a benefit program, Shawn, and you pay half and I'll pay half. Well, let's just do something together. And I think that if we just start to, it's not like just students coming in working part-time and then getting out of here because they're going back to school. We need to start, as employers, start to create career paths, and that there is some great opportunities. I think the public will pay for. It's getting a bit high. I believe they're going to pay for quality service, quality food, and if the operator needs to put their prices up, I think that's all right. If they know that this restaurant is doing everything it can, take care of its people, take care of its guests, be a good corporate citizen in the community. And I think if we do that, I think we can start as employers to create more of a softer perception of hospitality. Is not just like, as you say, 80% turnover, see you later. That's really costly for us. you work for me and all of a sudden you're gone. I have to train somebody and maybe I'll never find anybody as good as you. So that's the risk you take.
So I know we've had a big reflection on 2024.
Yeah.
What do you feel like 2025 is going to look like? What is your, let's blue sky it, crystal ball it, 2025, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling actually pretty good. We have this is not breaking news, but it's not announced yet. But Minister Lana Popham, who you will know from Vancouver Island, she's been put back on with us as our key person within government, even despite the fact that she's in agriculture now and formerly tourism. She loves her industry, so we now have a conduit to speak to anybody in government through one person. So she's kind of like. The unofficial, I'd be careful, if the premier's list this, you can go, no, don't say that. But she's like our Ministry of Hospitality, because we are such a big industry, like 15,000 restaurants and $18 billion in sales and 180,000 employees. Like, it's a big deal. And that's just us. And then you've got the hotels and stuff. But Lana's going to be troubleshooting this. And so when we have a problem with WorkSafe or we have a problem with liquor licensing, I'll tell you another issue I think we're looking at there. She says, okay, she's great. I'll connect you to this minister. I'll do this. And she comes at it from the point of view, what do you guys need? So some of the things that we want to do right now, we're going to fix this hospitality or situation with WorkSafe. But I think we need to get more, sort of dining programs. The dining program coming up in Victoria, that gets people out. So what else can we do to get people out and encourage them to go to pubs and not just restaurants, but just go out and enjoy hospitality? What events can we bring in? We know that, Taylor Swift was an extreme example, but that happens when people go out and they go, I'm going to spend some money and I don't really care. I'm going to escape my sort of life. And we've got to sort of get away from this deliver my food at home and Netflix attitude, getting people out. I mean, we sort of hurt ourselves because of the pandemic by making it so easy for you to have a dining experience in your house. It's pretty easy not to go out. So on the other hand, we worked really hard to get Uber in place, and now Uber is going to be in place all throughout British Columbia. That was a passion of ours, because that just makes the transportation easier. So there's that. I think that we need some stuff on liquor to help industry. One of the technical issues, is the ability for you to get speculative products fast and not within 8 weeks or never get them or they don't show up. And the reason that I'm pushing this one, I mean, I came from the BC wine industry, but we are not going to have a great supply of BC wines for several years, 3 or 4 years. So what are we going to do as operators to replace that innovation and differentials on our wine lists apart from our competitors? There's 6,000, I think, so spec products sitting in the warehouse that would be they're good value, they're good buys, they're interesting. So get this, the government has been trying for 7 years to figure out how to move a case of wine from Richmond to downtown Vancouver or to Vancouver Island within an Amazon. Like Amazon, you get that in 2 days. This takes weeks. So we are saying fix that. And I think if we fix that, the industry would go, okay, something's happening here. But it's been 7 years. It's been 7 years since they did a study on that. So that sort of thing. Interest rates will come down. Tourism is going to be strong. I think this government in Victoria is going to understand that business is critical to it. I think the government's going to start to fix this year on crime and our streets. I think they have to now. It's at a crisis. And we'll see a change in the federal government. And I think that's going to just help immensely to get out of this. It's not helping right now what's going on in Ottawa, because a lot of the stuff that, like immigration and foreign workers, it comes out of Ottawa. And when they're in this mess they are right now. So, yeah, so I'm optimistic. I think if you give an entrepreneur, you know how entrepreneurial it is, Shawn, in this industry.
Yep.
If you get a little bit of hope and just a few things that we're working on, people get excited.
One piece of advice you'd just give to someone who owns a restaurant who comes to you and they're a little bit frazzled from 2024. What's the one piece of advice you're going to give to the person in 2025?
Don't give up. It's going to get better. I know it's going to get better. And it's horrible. I mean, We were in a restaurant last night. The reason we were there is because they're closing. Is Chiapino's in Vancouver. He's been there for 25 years. Um, Pino, his restaurant was get this. He's recently recognized as one of the best 50 Italian restaurants outside of Italy in the world. And but the reason he's closing is, and I don't know this is so public, but he's paying like an incredible amount of rent. You could go in there and have the finest bottle of wine and his best entree. His rent has gone right through the roof, largely, I think, because of downloading of municipal taxes. Can't make it anymore. It's not worth it, and it's really, really sad. So, so I saw him last night. He looked tired, he a little bit broken. But you know what? His spirit is, I'm going to come back. Maybe again, I don't know what I'm going to do, but he'll reinvent himself. So we need people to reinvent themselves, and just to kind of make sure that all the fundamentals are in place. A good social media presence. Really looking at their costings, making sure that menus aren't too complicated, making sure they got happy staff, relying on our organizations to help. I mean, one of the things that we do is and I just said this in our message at the year end, is we're here all Christmas. We're here anytime you need us, like phone us, even with the smallest of things. We can help you out, and lean on these organizations to help you out. We don't expect that the small business owner is going to be able to solve any of this stuff. That's our job, but they have to reach out, and we find that when that happens, their confidence goes up. So I'm kind of being a bit wordy here, but I feel very optimistic about 2024. And because if we don't, I think this is our 2025. If we don't, Shawn, I feel that this is the pivotal year. We're going to have, we'll look back a year from now, and you and I are talking and say, boy, that was a terrible year. We're either going to go this way or we're going to go that way. But there's no more middle ground right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, rent is a interesting number. I've been really harping on rent a lot lately because I've been trying to break down actual expenses for a lot of operators, because I think sometimes we spitball them. Even the best operators like, oh, I can cover that rent, and I'm like, no, make sure it's 6 to 10% of your top line revenue. Closer to 6, lower than 6 is fantastic. And I've looked at some commercial property in Victoria just to keep sort of where the market's sitting, and I'm seeing like $16,000 worth of rent on maybe a 70 or 65 seat pub, and I'm like, you got to hit $250,000 worth of sales in a month to cover your rent at that number. Like, that is just an exorbitant amount of money to try and make.
That's a lot of hamburgers and beer, huh? I mean, if you just think about it, and I think that is a bit of another issue. Is we got to make sure we get people that are coming into the industry and they don't sort of go, no, I can cover it. I'll just put the prices up a bit more and cover it. They won't cover it. Then we've got problems. So some fundamentals. I encourage anybody that's listening to this to say, I'm going to get in my own restaurant or pub or whatever. Do some research. Reach out to guys like you or us and stuff, and look at some fundamentals. But $250,000 in sales a month. You're approaching a $3 million operation. That's not small.
No.
I mean, it's actually medium. And in an economy that's a bit wobbly right now, that's a risk I wouldn't want to take.
No. So what I do at the end of the podcast, as you know, I interview a lot of entrepreneurs and bar professionals, and you are obviously in the thick of it when it comes to the industry. I always ask 5 deep questions at the end of every podcast for my guests. So what is one life experience or lesson that has shaped your perspective the most, and how do you carry that forward in your life?
Pandemic. It was about bringing everybody together, clear communication lines between government, our consumer, and industry. And we are all on the same page. And that's what I want to accomplish now, is to get us back to that one voice, one strength, moving government that listens to us, not letting government move on its own.
If you could leave one lasting message or piece of wisdom for the world, what would it be and why?
To the where?
If you could leave one lasting message or piece of wisdom for the world, what would it be and why?
You know what? Get the facts. Absolutely get the facts, and be part of the solution. Don't be part of the, I don't really understand, but I'm going to have an opinion. Be very selective as to what you hear and how you do it, and take that and help the person, the people, the businesses around you.
Looking back on your journey, what is something you wish you had understood earlier in life?
Consensus, industry consensus. We see it in the wine industry in British Columbia. When I chaired the Wine Institute and was in the wine business, we saw big versus small, and it's still that way, fractured. We're a bit fractured in the restaurant industry. We've got to start to unify. So consensus is terribly important, particularly when you're trying to get government to make a move.
How do you define success, and has your definition of it changed over time?
I think success is knowing that when you put your head down the pillow, that you actually went outside of yourself and made a difference, whether it's to your neighbor or to a small business, to a positive message, to maybe handing off that extra food you had in a restaurant to somebody in the streets that's unfortunate, is when you go to sleep, you'll sleep much better, knowing that you've reached out of your own soul and forget about yourself. You'll be much better off in the long run.
What do you hope your legacy will be, and what steps are you taking to build it?
As a guy that was never gave up, and had unique experiences. In fact, I breaking news, maybe going to try to write a book about all the experience I've had in my life in the wine industry, with the David Foster Foundation, with the restaurant industry, and what are the little stories and gems that I can leave behind with the experience. Again, it's just being unselfish and putting yourself out there, and as a leader, that people know that you're genuine and you're passionate and you're not going to give up. And this is not about me hanging out with politicians and having dinners. This is about on the ground with people like you to actually make a difference. The legacy would be this industry stabilizes and starts to grow, and then I think I'd feel much better than where we are right now.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Ian. I really, really appreciate it. It's perfect for the last live stream for the year, and a good outlook for 2025. So thank you so much for your time.
Shawn, thank you. I mean, you shine lights on our industry that don't get shone, and I really appreciate Shawn. Huh? That's pretty good. But I appreciate that very much. I know a lot of people follow you, and you're well respected in your community. So it's a privilege for me to come on and spend some time with you, even though we had some technical problems at the front.
Well, thank you so much for your time again, Ian. I'll chat to you very soon.
All right, Shawn. All the best.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening, Pose Shifters. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really enjoy sitting down with friends and peers and just chatting about the industry and getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on out there. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, everything on all the platforms. Just hit it up and I'll do my best to answer any queries or questions you have. I'll see you next week, guys. Bye.